Hello there. Welcome back. Tonight, you don't need to learn anything at all. You don't need to sit in any particular way or breathe in any particular rhythm. There is nothing here that requires your attention, only your rest. We're going to wander gently through the quiet science of what happens inside your body when your mind grows still. How cells begin to repair, how the brain softens, how the body remembers its own ancient rhythm of healing, the same rhythm it has carried for thousands of years. Think of it, perhaps, as a garden after rain. When the noise stops, everything begins to grow on its own. The soil does not strain. The roots do not hurry. They simply receive what the sky has offered and begin, quietly, to reach. So whenever you're ready, let yourself settle in. Let your body find its shape. And if sleep finds you along the way, that is the most natural thing in the world. Your brain has a network that wakes up whenever your mind begins to wander. It is called the default mode network, and it is one of the most active systems in the human brain. Researchers at Yale University, using functional MRI scans, observed that this network lights up when a person is not focused on any particular task, when the mind drifts to memories, to worries, to plans that have not yet arrived. It is, in a sense, the brain's restless narrator, always replaying, always rehearsing, always circling back to unfinished thoughts. What makes this network so interesting is that it requires no instruction. It activates on its own, filling every gap in attention with its quiet commentary. It can replay a conversation from this morning or rehearse one that has not yet happened. It is tireless, persistent, and entirely automatic, like a radio that turns itself on whenever the room grows quiet. And perhaps there is something quietly comforting in knowing that this wandering is not a flaw. It is simply what the brain does when it has not yet been invited to rest, like a river that keeps moving until it finds a still pool. And tonight, perhaps, this is that pool. Scientists have given this wandering network a name: the default mode network. It sits at the crossroads of several brain regions, including the medial prefrontal cortex and the posterior cingulate cortex. Together, these areas form a kind of background hum, a constant inner monologue that replays conversations, imagines future scenarios, and revisits moments long past. It is always on, always murmuring, even when the rest of the brain grows quiet. Some researchers describe it as a narrator that never quite finishes its story. It picks up threads from the day and weaves them into tangled loops, not because it wants to cause distress, but because that is simply its design. It evolved to plan, to predict, to prepare, and in the safety of this moment, it has not yet received the signal that planning can wait. And yet, when stillness is offered, this narrator begins to soften, not silenced, but gently lowered, like the volume on a radio turning slowly down. The story does not end. It simply grows quieter, until the spaces between the words become wider than the words themselves. The default mode network is sometimes called the monkey mind. The phrase comes from Buddhist tradition, where the restless mind is compared to a monkey swinging from branch to branch, never quite settling, always reaching for the next thought. Modern neuroscience has found a striking parallel. The DMN behaves in much the same way. leaping from memory to worry to fantasy, rarely pausing in the present moment. This comparison is more than poetic. Brain imaging studies have confirmed that the DMN's activity increases during periods of mental restlessness and decreases during focused attention or meditation. The monkey, it turns out, is measurable. Its swings leave traces in the brain's electrical patterns, patterns that slow and soften when the mind is offered a reason to be still. But perhaps the monkey is not misbehaving. Perhaps it simply has not been shown a quiet branch to rest on. And meditation, in its own gentle way, offers exactly that, a still place where the mind can finally stop swinging, and where the branches hold steady in the dark. Mind wandering consumes roughly half of our waking hours. A study conducted at Harvard University, published in the journal Science, found that people spend approximately 47% of their waking time thinking about something other than what they are currently doing. That is nearly half of every day spent somewhere else, in yesterday's regrets or tomorrow's uncertainties. The researchers used a smartphone application to contact over 2,000 participants at random moments throughout the day, asking them what they were doing and what they were thinking about. The results were remarkably consistent across ages, occupation, and culture. The mind wanders, it seems, as naturally as the lungs breathe. They also found that this wandering was associated with lower levels of happiness, not because the thoughts themselves were always unpleasant, but because the mind was never quite here, never fully resting in the present. And perhaps that is why stillness feels like such a relief. It is not an escape from the world, but a gentle return to it, a homecoming so quiet you might not even notice it happening. Meditation does not silence the default mode network. It gently turns down the volume. Researchers at Yale, led by Judson Brewer, used brain imaging to compare experienced meditators with non-meditators. They found that during meditation, activity in the DMN decreased significantly, but it did not disappear. The network was still there, still humming, but softer now, like a busy town square, slowly emptying at nightfall. Brewer's team also noticed something else. Even when the DMN did activate during meditation, the meditators' brains showed a rapid, corrective response. Other regions stepped in to gently bring attention back. The mind still wandered, but it returned more quickly, more smoothly, as though it had learned a quieter path home. The mind was not forced into silence. It was simply given permission to wander less, and in that gentle turning down, something else became audible. The quiet, steady rhythm of the present moment. Perhaps, if you'd like, let your jaw soften just a little right now, as though the word peace just melted between your lips. There is nothing you need to hold. Brain scans reveal that a key hub of the default mode network grows quieter during meditation. The posterior cingulate cortex, a region deep in the middle of the brain, is one of the most active nodes in the DMN. It plays a central role in self-referential thinking, the kind of thought that revolves around me and my story. During meditation, this region shows a measurable decrease in activity. This finding has been replicated across multiple laboratories and meditation traditions. Whether the practice involves focused attention on the breath, open monitoring of sensations, the loving-kindness visualization. The posterior cingulate cortex tends to quiet down. It is as though the brain's spotlight, which normally shines inward on worries and memories, slowly dims, not turning off, but softening its beam into something diffuse and warm. And in that softening, the rest of the mind can settle into something more spacious, a quiet room where the echoes have finally faded, and where the walls themselves seem to breathe. The brain learns to notice when the mind drifts. Researchers call this gentle skill decentering. Meditators develop stronger connections between the default mode network and regions associated with self-monitoring, particularly the dorsal anterior cingulate cortex. This means that when the mind begins to wander, there is a quiet part of the brain that gently notices, like a guardian who taps you on the shoulder and says, softly, "You've drifted." Over time, this noticing becomes less effortful. It is not a harsh interruption, but a gentle redirection, the way a stream might nudge a floating leaf back toward the center. Researchers call this metacognitive awareness, the ability to observe your own thoughts without being swept away by them. It is a skill that strengthens with practice, like a muscle that grows from use. This is not about control. It is about awareness. The mind still wanders, but it returns more easily, more gently, like a leaf carried by a stream that finds its way back to still water. And each return is a little softer than the last. These changes in the brain persist even outside of meditation. The quieting of the default mode network is not something that happens only during a meditation session. Studies have shown that experienced meditators carry a calmer baseline into their everyday lives. Their DMN is less reactive at rest, less likely to spiral into rumination or worry, even when they are not meditating. This is what neuroscientists call trait effects, as opposed to state effects. A state effect is temporary. It lasts only during the practice. A trait effect is lasting. It becomes part of who you are. And the research suggests that with consistent practice, the state of inner quiet gradually becomes a trait. The brain doesn't just visit stillness. It begins to live closer to it. It is as though the brain, having practiced stillness enough times, begins to remember what quiet feels like and returns to it more naturally, like a path through a forest that becomes easier to find the more often it is walked. And perhaps, tonight, you are already on that path. A single slow exhale can switch the body from alert mode into rest. The autonomic nervous system has two branches. One is the sympathetic, the accelerator, the alarm, the part that prepares you to act. The other is the parasympathetic, the brake, the balm, the part that whispers, "It is safe to rest now." A single long, slow exhale can tip the balance toward the parasympathetic side. This happens because the exhale activates a specific set of neurons near the heart that communicate directly with the vagus nerve. These neurons sense the stretching of the lungs and send a signal downward. Slow the heart, ease the muscles, soften the vigilance. It is a remarkably simple mechanism. The body does not need instructions or effort. It simply needs permission. One slow breath, one gentle invitation to let go. And perhaps, in this moment, your next exhale is already carrying that invitation deeper into your body than you know. The vagus nerve, the longest cranial nerve, carries signals of calm from the brainstem all the way to the abdomen. It winds through the body like a quiet river through a valley, touching the heart, the lungs, the stomach, the intestines. When stimulated by slow breathing or meditation, it sends a cascade of calming signals, lowering heart rate, easing digestion, softening muscle tension. The word vagus comes from the Latin for wandering, and the name is fitting. This single nerve wanders through nearly every major organ, connecting them in a web of quiet communication. It is the body's longest internal messenger, and its message, when activated by stillness, is remarkably consistent. Slow down, soften, arrest. Some researchers call the vagus nerve the body's built-in peacekeeper. It does not need to be activated with force. A slow breath is enough. A moment of stillness is enough. A whispered word in the dark is enough. Whenever you're ready, let your shoulders drop just a little lower, like snow settling gently on a quiet branch. There is no hurry. There is nowhere else to be. Slow breathing during meditation can lower your heart rate by 5 to 10 beats per minute. This happens within just a few minutes of settling into a slower rhythm. The heart, which responds to every shift in the nervous system, begins to follow the breath, slowing when the exhale lengthens, easing when the body signals safety. The mechanism is called respiratory sinus arrhythmia, and it is a natural feature of a healthy heart. On each inhale, the heart speeds up slightly. On each exhale, it slows. When you deliberately lengthen the exhale, you amplify this slowing effect, gently pulling the heart rate down like a soft hand on a pendulum. It is a quiet conversation between breath and heartbeat, one that has been happening since before you were born. You do not need to direct it. You only need to allow it. And perhaps, right now, your heart is already beginning to slow, just a little, without being asked, following a rhythm older than language, older than thought. The ratio of exhale to inhale matters. Longer exhales signal the brain that it is safe to rest. When the exhale is longer than the inhale, the vagus nerve is stimulated more strongly, sending a deeper wave of calm through the body. This is why sighing feels so good. It is the body's natural way of pressing its own reset button. A sigh is not a sign of defeat. It is a physiological release, a small act of self-regulation that the body performs instinctively. Some breathing techniques formalize this pattern. Inhaling for 4 counts, exhaling for 6 or 8. But the body does not need a formula. It knows this rhythm instinctively. It has been practicing it in every yawn, every sigh, every slow breath taken in the moments before sleep. Perhaps your next exhale will be just a little longer than the one before, and the one after that, a little longer still, like waves pulling gently back from shore, each one leaving the sand a little smoother, a little more still. The diaphragm, when allowed to move fully, gently massages the organs beneath it with each breath. This dome-shaped muscle sits just below the lungs. When it descends on the inhale, it creates a soft, rhythmic pressure on the stomach, the liver, the intestines, a kind of internal lullaby that soothes the organs without any conscious effort. Most people breathe shallowly, using only the upper chest, barely moving the diaphragm at all. This shallow breathing keeps the body in a mild state of alertness, as though it is always half ready to spring into action. But when breathing deepens, as it often does during meditation, the diaphragm resumes its full range of motion, and this gentle massage returns. The body begins to settle from the inside, organ by organ, like a house growing quiet, room by room. First the attic, then the hallway, then the kitchen, until the whole structure hums with nothing but the sound of rest. Breathing is the only autonomic function that can also be consciously controlled. The heart beats on its own. Digestion continues without instruction. Body temperature regulates itself beneath awareness. But breath exists in a unique space. It can run on autopilot, or it can be guided by intention. This dual nature makes it a bridge between the voluntary and involuntary systems of the body. This is why breath has been central to contemplative practices for thousands of years. It is the one place where the conscious mind and the autonomic body overlap, a doorway between the world you can control and the world that runs itself. When you slow the breath deliberately, the body reads it as a signal of safety. And when the body feels safe, systems that were on pause, digestion, immune repère, memory consolidation, quietly resume. In many traditions, the breath is seen as exactly that, a doorway, the one place where the conscious mind can gently reach into the body's deeper rhythms and say, slow down, it's safe. And the body, remarkably, listens. Vagal tone, the strength of the vagus nerve's calming signals, can improve with regular meditation practice. Vagal tone is a measure of how effectively the parasympathetic nervous system can calm the body after stress. Higher vagal tone is associated with better emotional regulation, stronger immune function, and more restful sleep. People with high vagal tone tend to recover from stressful events more quickly. Their bodies know how to return to baseline. Studies have found that regular meditation practice gradually strengthens vagal tone. Not dramatically, not overnight, but incrementally, like a path that becomes clearer the more it is traveled. Each session of stillness is another set of footprints on that path, and over time, the nerve's calming signals grow a little stronger, a little more reliable, a little more willing to arrive when called. Perhaps the body is always practicing recovery, and perhaps all it needs is a little more encouragement, a few more quiet moments to remind it that the path home is always open. Heart rate variability increases with meditation, a subtle sign of resilience. Heart rate variability, or HRV, is the gentle fluctuation in time between one heartbeat and the next. Contrary to what one might expect, a healthy heart does not beat like a metronome. It varies slightly, speeding up on the inhale, slowing on the exhale, and this variability is a marker of a nervous system that can adapt, respond, and recover. Low HRV is associated with chronic stress, anxiety, and poor sleep. High HRV, by contrast, suggests a system that is flexible and responsive, one that can shift easily between states of action and rest. Meditation tends to increase HRV, suggesting that the body is becoming more nimble, more adaptable, more at ease with the natural ebb and flow of the day. It is a quietly hopeful measure, one that suggests the body is not rigid, but alive, responsive, breathing in its own gentle rhythm. Like the tide, if it feels right, soften the space between your eyebrows just a little, as though a warm hand just rested there, asking nothing, offering only stillness. In some traditions, the breath is described as the thread connecting the conscious mind to the body's deeper wisdom. The Sanskrit word prana means both breath and life force. In Chinese medicine, qi flows with each inhalation. In Sufi practice, the breath is a vehicle for remembrance. Across cultures and centuries, the breath has been understood not just as a biological function, but as the quietest conversation between body and mind. What unites these traditions is a shared observation that paying attention to the breath changes something. It does not require belief or effort. It simply asks for presence, a willingness to notice the air moving in and out, the chest rising and falling, the body doing what it has always done, moment after moment, without being asked. And perhaps that is what makes the breath so powerful as a tool for rest. It asks nothing. It demands no effort. It is simply there, a thread that has been holding you gently since the very first moment you arrived in this world, and it will hold you still tonight as you drift. In 1975, a Harvard cardiologist described a state he called the relaxation response. Herbert Benson had been studying the effects of transcendental meditation on blood pressure when he noticed something remarkable. During meditation, the body entered a distinct physiological state, one that was the mirror opposite of the stress response. Heart rate dropped, blood pressure lowered, oxygen consumption fell, muscle tension eased. The body, without being told, shifted from vigilance to repair. Benson was a cardiologist, not a mystic. He was interested in measurable, repeatable physiological changes, and what he found was exactly that: a consistent, reproducible state of deep rest that could be triggered by nothing more than quiet, repetitive mental focus. He called it the relaxation response. He spent the rest of his career studying this quiet miracle, the body's built-in ability to heal itself simply by growing still. Not a drug, not a procedure, just the ancient simplicity of a mind that has been given permission to stop. The relaxation response lowers oxygen consumption, heart rate, and blood pressure all at once. What makes this state so quietly fascinating is that it does not target a single system. It affects the entire body simultaneously. Oxygen consumption decreases by 10 to 20%, a drop that typically only occurs during sleep. Heart rate slows. Blood pressure gently drops. Even the rate of breathing declines, becoming deeper and more rhythmic. Benson measured these changes in controlled laboratory settings, confirming that they were not subjective impressions, but objective, measurable shifts. The relaxation response is as real as the stress response. It simply receives less attention because it is, by nature, quiet. It is as though the body receives a single signal. It is safe now, and every system responds in harmony, like an orchestra slowly lowering its instruments at the end of a long performance, settling into the kind of silence that holds more meaning than sound, a silence that heals. The relaxation response can be triggered by any repetitive mental focus, Benson discovered that the specific technique did not matter. A mantra worked. A prayer worked. Counting breaths worked. Even the rhythmic repetition of a single word, any word, was enough. What mattered was the gentle return of attention to something simple, again and again, without judgment. This finding was revolutionary because it separated the physiological response from any particular tradition or belief system. The relaxation response did not belong to Buddhism, or Hinduism, or any school of meditation. It belonged to the body. It was built into the nervous system itself, waiting to be activated by nothing more than quiet repetition and a willing mind. This means that the doorway to the relaxation response is not locked behind any particular tradition or practice. It is available to anyone, anywhere, at any time, perhaps even now. As these words drift gently past, the response is already beginning. Quietly, without effort, like dawn. During the relaxation response, muscle tension decreases and blood flow shifts toward areas of calm awareness. The muscles of the face, the jaw, the shoulders, the back, all of which tighten under stress, begin to release. Blood flow, which during stress concentrates in the limbs for action, redistributes toward the brain's centers of quiet awareness and toward the internal organs that handle digestion and repair. This redistribution is significant. When the body is in stress mode, it diverts resources away from maintenance and towards survival. Digestion slows. Immune function dampens. Tissue repair is postponed. But when the relaxation response is activated, these systems come back online, gently, gradually, as though a dam has been lifted and the water can flow where it is needed most. It is a physiological unwinding, as though the body has been clenching a fist all day and is finally, gently, letting go, not because it was told to, but because it was given the space and the silence to remember how the body's alarm system gradually steps back when the relaxation response is activated. The sympathetic nervous system, the part responsible for fight or flight, does not shut down. It simply eases, like a guard who has been standing at attention all day and is finally allowed to sit. The threat has not disappeared. Rather, the body has decided, gently, that the threat was never as large as it seemed. This easing is not instantaneous. It takes a few minutes of sustained quiet for the sympathetic tone to decrease measurably. But once it begins, the shift is self-reinforcing. Each moment of calm makes the next moment a little calmer. The nervous system begins to trust the stillness, the way a child begins to trust the dark after enough nights of safety. And in that easing, the parasympathetic system steps forward. The part that whispers, "Rest now and heal now, and you are safe." Perhaps notice your hands right now. Let each finger uncurl slowly, like petals opening at dawn. There is nothing you need to hold on to tonight. The night will hold you instead. The relaxation response shares characteristics with the early stages of sleep. Benson noted that the physiological changes during the relaxation response closely mirror what happens as the body transitions from wakefulness into sleep. Heart rate slows, breathing deepens, muscle tension dissolves, brain waves shift from fast beta patterns to slower, Dremia, alpha and theta rhythms. This overlap is not a coincidence. Both states involve a reduction in sympathetic nervous system activity and an increase in parasympathetic tone. Both involve a withdrawal of attention from the external world, and both create conditions in which the body can turn its resources inward toward consolidation, repair, and renewal. It is as though meditation and sleep are sisters, different in form, but sharing the same doorway. One is awake, the other asleep, but both are resting in the same quiet house. And perhaps tonight, as these facts drift gently past, that doorway is already opening, slowly, softly, without a sound. The body becomes less electrically reactive during this state. Skin conductance, a measure of how much the skin conducts electricity, which increases with arousal and stress, decreases measurably during the relaxation response. The body literally becomes less reactive, less charged, less on edge. This measure is often used in lie detectors and stress research because it is so sensitive to emotional arousal. Even a fleeting, anxious thought can increase skin conductance. During the relaxation response, however, this measure drops steadily, reflecting a nervous system that is genuinely standing down, not just appearing calm, but physiologically disengaging from threat. It is a subtle change, invisible to the naked eye, but profound in its implications. The body is not just resting, it is actively reducing its sensitivity to the outside world, creating a kind of quiet cocoon in which healing can begin undisturbed. A cocoon woven not from silk, but from stillness itself. Regular practice of the relaxation response has been linked to changes in gene expression. Researchers at Massachusetts General Hospital found that people who practiced the relaxation response regularly showed different patterns of gene expression compared to those who did not. Specifically, genes related to energy metabolism, mitochondrial function, and inflammation were affected, some upregulated, others downregulated, in patterns consistent with improved cellular health. This means that the experience of stillness may reach deeper than the nervous system, deeper than hormones, all the way to the level of the DNA. The body does not just feel different in meditation. At the molecular level, it begins to operate differently. The instructions the cells receive change, subtly, incrementally, but measurably, quietly, gently, one cell at a time, like a garden responding to rain it cannot see. Each drop invisible, but together enough to change the color of the leaves. And perhaps tonight, even as you rest, something in your cells is quietly beginning to shift. The brain produces electrical rhythms called brainwaves, and their speed reflects the mind's state. These rhythms are not metaphorical. They are measurable electrical oscillations produced by billions of neurons firing in synchrony. Electroencephalography, a technique that has been used since the 1920s, can detect these oscillations through sensors placed on the scalp. When the mind is busy and alert, the waves are fast and tight, like rain drumming on a window. When the mind begins to quiet, they slow and lengthen, like ripples on a lake, settling after the wind dies down. The transition is not sudden, it is gradual, a slow softening of the brain's electrical weather. Scientists classify these waves by frequency, beta for active thinking, alpha for relaxed awareness, theta for the edge of sleep, delta for deep rest, and meditation. It turns out, is one of the gentlest ways to guide the brain from one rhythm to another. Perhaps you can imagine your own brain waves slowing right now, not because you are trying, but because the conditions are right. The room is quiet, the body is still, and the waves are beginning to settle on their own. Alpha waves increase during meditation, the gentle hum of relaxed, wakeful awareness. Alpha waves oscillate between 8 and 12 cycles per second. They appear most strongly when the eyes are closed and the mind is calm but awake, a state sometimes described as relaxed alertness. During meditation, alpha activity increases across the brain, particularly in the frontal and occipital regions. Alpha waves were among the first brain rhythms ever recorded. Discovered by Hans Berger in 1929, he noticed that these waves appeared when his subjects closed their eyes and relaxed, and vanished when they opened their eyes or began thinking actively. Nearly a century later, meditation researchers observed the same pattern. Stillness invites alpha, and alpha invites calm. It is a curious thing. The brain becomes quieter, but not less aware. If anything, it becomes more aware, but in a softer way. Like the difference between staring at a bright light and gazing at the night sky. Both are seeing, but one allows for so much more. Theta waves emerge in deeper meditation. The same frequency found in the doorway between waking and sleep. Theta waves oscillate between 4 and 8 cycles per second. They are most commonly associated with drowsiness, daydreaming, and the hypnagogic state, that fluid, dreamlike territory just before sleep arrives. During deep meditation, theta activity increases, suggesting that the meditator is hovering in a space that is neither fully awake nor fully asleep. This liminal state is remarkably creative and restorative. Artists, musicians, and scientists have long reported that their best ideas arrive in these in-between moments, when the mind is no longer working but not yet sleeping. Meditation, in a way, cultivates access to this threshold, not to be productive, but to rest in the space where thoughts dissolve into something gentler. It is, perhaps, the brain's most poetic frequency, a place where thoughts dissolve into images, and images dissolve into stillness. A threshold, a doorway left softly open. And tonight, that doorway is closer than you think. If you'd like, let your chest open just a little wider right now, making room for one more slow, deep breath. There is no hurry. There is only this moment. Beta waves, linked to active thinking, naturally decrease during meditation. Beta waves are the brain's workhorses, oscillating between 12 and 30 cycles per second. They dominate when the mind is engaged in problem-solving, planning, analyzing, the kind of thinking that keeps the mental engine running at full speed. During meditation, beta activity decreases as the mind gently steps away from its to-do list. This does not mean the brain shuts down. It means the brain shifts its resources from the networks that analyze and plan to the networks that observe and rest. It is a reallocation, not a shutdown. The machinery is still there, still capable, It is simply being given permission to idle. It is like busy traffic on a highway, slowly quieting at dusk. The road is still there. The cars are still there. But the urgency has faded. And what remains is a kind of peaceful hum. The sound of a mind that has given itself permission to coast. And coasting, tonight, is more than enough. The shift from beta to alpha waves has been compared to the sky clearing after a busy day. Beta waves are the clouds. Necessary. Useful. Carrying thoughts like rain. But when they part, alpha waves emerge. The clear sky that was always there beneath. Meditation does not create this sky. It simply allows the clouds to drift. This metaphor holds up remarkably well in the neuroscience. The alpha state is not something manufactured by effort. It is the brain's natural resting frequency, the baseline it returns to when there is nothing demanding its attention. Stress, worry, and overstimulation suppress alpha waves. Stillness restores them. The practice of meditation, then, is less about creating something new and more about removing the conditions that prevent the brain from returning to its own quiet default. And perhaps that is why meditation often feels less like doing something and more like returning to something. The clarity was never missing. It was only waiting for the noise to soften. The way stars wait for twilight before they appear. Meditation increases coherence between brain regions. Different areas begin to harmonize. Coherence, in this context, means that different areas of the brain begin to synchronize their electrical rhythms, pulsing together in time. Normally, different brain regions operate somewhat independently, each running its own rhythm at its own tempo. But during meditation, these rhythms begin to align. This interregional harmony is associated with improved cognitive function, emotional stability, and a deeper sense of inner quiet. It is as though the brain's various departments, attention, emotion, memory, sensation, begin to work from the same schedule instead of competing for priority. It is a gentle reorganization, not forced, not sudden, more like a chorus of voices that had been singing separate melodies, gradually finding the same note and holding it together in the stillness, a harmony so quiet you can only hear it when everything else falls away. Long-term meditators can sustain gamma waves, associated with deep awareness and compassion. Gamma waves oscillate above 30 cycles per second and are the fastest brain waves measurable. They are associated with heightened perception, focused attention, and states of deep integration. In a landmark study, neuroscientist Antoine Lutz and colleagues at the University of Wisconsin found that experienced Tibetan Buddhist monks produced unusually strong and sustained gamma activity during meditation, particularly during practices focused on compassion. What surprised the researchers was not only the intensity of the gamma waves, but their persistence. The monks could sustain this state for extended periods, suggesting that years of practice had fundamentally changed the brain's baseline activity. The deepest practitioners showed gamma patterns even at rest, as though stillness had become their natural frequency. It is a quietly fascinating finding that the deepest stillness can produce the brain's highest frequency, as though at the very bottom of silence, something luminous is always waiting. Brainwave patterns during deep meditation resemble those of early sleep. The theta-dominant patterns observed in deep meditation are strikingly similar to those seen as the brain transitions from wakefulness into sleep. The hypnagogic state, where thoughts loosen and images begin to float. Some researchers have suggested that meditation and sleep share the same neural doorway. This similarity has practical implications. People who struggle with sleep often have difficulty making the transition from beta-dominant wakefulness to the slower rhythms of sleep onset. Meditation may help by training the brain to make this shift more smoothly, practicing the descent, so to speak, so that when night comes, the path downward is already familiar. Perhaps that is why so many people drift off during meditation. Not because they are failing, but because the brain has found its way to the threshold of rest. And once there, crossing over is the most natural thing in the world. Like a boat that reaches still water and simply stops. Neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to reshape itself, continues throughout life. For decades, scientists believed the adult brain was fixed, that its structure was set by early adulthood and could only decline from there. But research over the past 30 years has revealed a very different picture. The brain remains remarkably plastic throughout life, capable of growing new connections, strengthening existing ones, and even generating new neurons in certain regions. This discovery changed everything. It meant that the brain is not a finished product, but a living, responsive organ, one that reshapes itself in response to experience, learning, and practice. And meditation is one of the gentlest ways to encourage this reshaping, not through force or intensity, but through quiet, repeated attention. It is not a dramatic renovation. It is more like water slowly finding its way through stone. Patient, persistent, and invisible to anyone watching, but undeniable to anyone who waits long enough to see the result. Whenever it feels comfortable, let your belly soften right now. No need to hold anything in. Just let it rest. Like a sleeping animal, breathing slowly in the dark. 8 weeks of mindfulness, meditation increased gray matter in the hippocampus. A study led by Sarah Lazar at Harvard used MRI scans to compare the brains of participants before and after an 8-week mindfulness program. The results showed measurable increases in gray matter density in the hippocampus, a region deep in the brain that plays a central role in learning, memory, and self-awareness. The hippocampus is one of the most stress-sensitive regions in the brain. Chronic stress can cause it to shrink, literally reducing the brain's capacity for memory and emotional regulation. The finding that meditation could increase its density was significant. It suggested that the damage of chronic stress might not be permanent, that with the right conditions, quiet, stillness, gentle attention, the brain could begin to rebuild what stress had worn away. 8 weeks. That is all it took for the brain to begin physically changing in response to stillness. Not surgery, not medication, just the quiet practice of paying gentle attention, again and again, like rain falling softly on dry ground. The same study found decreased gray matter in the amygdala, the brain's alarm bell. The amygdala is a small, almond-shaped structure that processes fear and threat. It is the part of the brain that sounds the alarm when something feels dangerous, real, or imagined. It is fast, reactive, and often overactive in people who live with chronic stress or anxiety. After 8 weeks of mindfulness practice, Participants showed reduced gray matter density in this region. Importantly, this reduction was correlated with decreases in self-reported stress, suggesting that the physical change in the brain was accompanied by a felt change in daily experience. The alarm system was not only structurally quieter, it felt quieter too. The alarm bell did not disappear. It simply grew a little less sensitive, a little less reactive, as though the brain, having spent enough time in stillness, decided that not every shadow deserved a siren, and that some nights, the quiet is simply the quiet. The prefrontal cortex tends to be thicker in long-term meditators. The prefrontal cortex sits just behind the forehead and is involved in focus, decision-making, and emotional regulation. It is the part of the brain that pauses before reacting, that considers before choosing, that holds steady when the rest of the mind wants to spiral. Research at Harvard found that experienced meditators had a thicker cortex in these regions compared to non-meditators, even accounting for age. This is significant because the prefrontal cortex naturally thins with aging. The finding suggests that meditation may help preserve the brain's capacity for calm, thoughtful response, not by adding something new, but by slowing the loss of something that was always there, a thicker cortex. In this context, is not about more thinking. It is about wiser resting, the kind of rest that comes from a mind that has learned to pause, gently, patiently, before it reacts. The insula, a region that senses what is happening inside the body, becomes more active with meditation. The insula is tucked deep within the cerebral cortex and plays a role in interoception, the ability to feel your own heartbeat. Notice your breathing. Sense tension or warmth. It is the brain's internal weather station, constantly monitoring the body's inner landscape. Meditators show increased insular activity, suggesting a heightened awareness of subtle bodily signals. This is not hypervigilance. It is a quiet attentiveness, the kind that notices the shoulders tightening before the tension becomes pain, or senses the breath shallowing before anxiety fully arrives. It is early detection, run by the gentlest alarm system the brain possesses. It is as though meditation tunes the radio to a station that was always broadcasting, the quiet station of the body itself, the one that whispers about tension in the shoulders, warmth in the hands, weight in the eyelids, the station that says, without words, I am here, listen. Neuroplastic changes from meditation are invisible day by day, but undeniable over time. You cannot feel your hippocampus growing. You cannot sense your amygdala softening. These changes happen below the threshold of awareness, in the quiet spaces between neurons, in the slow strengthening of synaptic connections that are used again and again. This is both the challenge and the beauty of neuroplasticity. It is invisible in the moment, but cumulative over time. Each meditation session is a single brushstroke, too small to see on its own, but part of a larger painting that reveals itself gradually. The brain that has practiced stillness 1,000 times is not the same brain that has never tried. It has been shaped gently, patiently, without force, by the simple act of returning to quiet, like a path through a meadow worn smooth by feet that never rushed. You cannot see the path being made, but one morning, there it is, clear, familiar, and waiting. The corpus callosum, The bridge between left and right brain shows enhanced connectivity in meditators. The corpus callosum is the largest white matter structure in the brain, a thick bundle of over 200 million nerve fibers that allows the two hemispheres to communicate. Every thought that requires both logic and intuition, both language and spatial awareness, depends on signals passing through this bridge. Studies have found that experienced meditators show stronger, more coherent signals passing through the corpus callosum. The communication between hemispheres is not just more frequent, it is more synchronized. The two halves of the brain are not working harder, they are working more harmoniously. Like two musicians who have played together long enough to anticipate each other's timing. It is as though meditation strengthens the conversation between the brain's two halves. The analytical and the intuitive, the verbal and the spatial, the doing and the being. In stillness, these two sides learn to speak more fluently to each other. And perhaps that fluency is what inner peace sounds like. Perhaps notice the soles of your feet right now. Imagine warmth spreading gently from heel to toe, as though the earth itself were offering you a quiet kind of holding. Even brief meditation training, as little as 4 days, can produce measurable changes in brain connectivity. A study by Fadel Zaidan and colleagues found that just 4 days of mindfulness training led to detectable changes in how brain regions communicated with each other. Participants showed improved attention, reduced anxiety, and enhanced connectivity in networks associated with self-regulation. 4 days, not 4 months or 4 years. The brain, it seems, begins to respond to stillness almost immediately. This does not mean that 4 days of practice creates lasting transformation. Long-term changes require longer practice, but it does mean that the brain is listening from the very first session. The seeds of change are planted the moment stillness is offered. Even if the garden takes longer to bloom, like parched soil drinking in the first drops of rain, the change may be small at first, and visible even, but the soil remembers, and it has already begun to soften. The brain does not just change during meditation. It carries those quieter patterns into everyday life. This is perhaps the most quietly comforting discovery of all. The brain does not switch back to its old patterns the moment meditation ends. The neural pathways, shaped by stillness, persist, influencing how the brain responds to stress, how it processes emotion, how it settles into sleep. Researchers call these trait effects lasting changes in the brain's baseline functioning that extend beyond the practice session itself. With enough repetition, the brain's resting state shifts. The default becomes a little calmer, a little more centered, a little more willing to settle rather than spiral. The change is not dramatic. It is architectural, a quiet restructuring of the brain's preferred patterns. It is like learning to speak a second language. At first, you must think deliberately, but over time, the words come naturally, even in your dreams. Stillness, once practiced, becomes a language the brain never quite forgets. The immune system has its own kind of intelligence, billions of cells patrolling, remembering, and responding. It is one of the most complex systems in the human body. White blood cells circulate through the bloodstream like quiet sentinels, recognizing threats, mounting responses, and storing memories of past invaders. The immune system does not need to be told what to do. It knows. It has its own memory, its own communication network, its own decision-making hierarchy, and yet it is remarkably sensitive to the state of the mind. Decades of research in psychoneuroimmunology have shown that psychological stress can suppress immune function, reducing the activity of natural killer cells, lowering antibody production, and increasing susceptibility to infection. The mind and the immune system, it turns out, are in constant conversation. When the mind is stressed, the immune system falters. When the mind grows still, the immune system seems to find its footing once again. Like a garden that blooms more freely when the gardener stops pulling at the roots, natural killer cells, part of the body's first line of defense, appear to increase in activity after meditation. Natural killer cells are a type of lymphocyte that patrols the bloodstream, seeking out cells that have been infected by viruses or have become abnormal. They do not need prior activation. They are always ready, always watching. They are among the immune system's most vigilant guardians. A systematic review by Black and Slavich examined the effects of mindfulness meditation on various immune parameters and found that meditation interventions were associated with increased NK cell activity. The cells were not only more numerous in some studies, they were also more active, more effective at identifying and responding to threats. These are the body's quiet guardians. They do not announce themselves. They simply work, a little more effectively, it seems, when the mind above them grows still, as though silence itself is a kind of fuel for the cells that keep you safe. CD4+ T cells, the coordinators of immune response, have been observed to increase after mindfulness programs. CD4+ T cells are sometimes called helper cells because they orchestrate the immune response, signaling other cells when and where to act. They are the conductors of a very quiet orchestra, one that plays continuously inside every living body, coordinating the work of billions of specialized cells. Studies suggest that mindfulness meditation may support the number and function of these cells in populations under high stress, including people living with HIV. Meditation programs have been associated with slower decline of CD4+ counts. The mechanism is not fully understood, but the pattern is consistent. A calmer mind appears to support a more coordinated immune response. It is as though stillness provides a clearer stage for the immune system's performance, fewer distractions, less noise, and a conductor who can hear every instrument more clearly. The gut houses roughly 70% of the immune system, profoundly sensitive to stress and to its absence. This is one of those facts that feels both surprising and deeply obvious. The gut, home to trillions of microorganisms, thousands of nerve endings, and the majority of the body's immune cells, is perhaps the most stress-sensitive organ in the body. When the mind races, the gut tightens, digestion slows, the delicate balance of the microbiome shifts. When the mind settles, the gut eases, blood flow returns to the digestive organs, the microbiome stabilizes, and the immune cells embedded in the gut wall resume their quiet work of surveillance and repair. Meditation, by calming the nervous system and reducing cortisol, may indirectly support the gut's vast immune network, not by targeting the gut directly, but by changing the signals it receives from the brain above, like sunlight reaching a garden through a window. Indirect, but quietly transformative. The garden does not know where the light comes from. It only knows that it can grow. If you'd like, let your tongue rest softly against the roof of your mouth right now. A quiet place of stillness. You don't need to speak. You don't need to swallow. Just rest. Meditation has been linked to increased antibody production after flu vaccination. A study by Richard Davidson and colleagues at the University of Wisconsin found that participants who completed an 8-week mindfulness program produced significantly more antibodies after receiving a flu vaccine compared to a control group. The immune system, it seemed, responded more robustly when the mind was calm. This is a particularly compelling type of evidence because antibody production is an objective, measurable outcome, not a self-report or a subjective impression. The immune system was literally producing more of its own protective molecules in people who had spent 8 weeks practicing stillness. The mind was quiet, and the body built stronger defenses. It is a small, but quietly remarkable finding. The body does not just rest during meditation. It prepares. It builds. It fortifies. Not with walls, but with the gentle, invisible architecture of readiness, as though stillness is the blueprint, and the immune system is the builder. The thymus gland, where T cells mature, may be quietly supported by regular relaxation practices. The thymus sits behind the sternum, just above the heart. It is where T cells, critical soldiers of the adaptive immune system, are educated and released into the bloodstream. During childhood, the thymus is large and active, but with age and chronic stress, it gradually shrinks, a process called thymic involution. Some researchers believe that regular relaxation practices may slow this process, not by reversing the clock, but by reducing the chronic stress that accelerates it. The thymus, like so many organs, functions best in conditions of calm. When the body is flooded with cortisol, the thymus struggles. When cortisol eases, the thymus can do its work more freely. It is a small organ with an outsized role, and perhaps it, too, benefits from the same thing that benefits the rest of the body: a mind that has learned to be still, and a night that has been given permission to be quiet. Researchers describe meditation's effect on immunity as salutogenic, creating conditions for health to arise naturally. The word salutogenic comes from the Latin salus, meaning health. It is the opposite of pathogenic, rather than fighting disease. It cultivates wellness. This is a subtle but quietly profound distinction. Meditation does not attack illness. It does not wage war on pathogens. It does not prescribe or intervene. Instead, it creates a kind of inner environment where health is simply more likely to flourish. By reducing stress, lowering inflammation, and supporting the body's own repair mechanisms, the body already knows how to heal. Meditation simply removes some of the obstacles, like a gardener who does not force flowers to grow, but tends the soil, waters gently, and trusts that life will do the rest. The flowers were always going to bloom. They just needed a little less interference and a little more quiet. In stillness, the body's quiet defenders seem to work a little more effectively. This is not a dramatic claim. It is a gentle observation, drawn from dozens of studies across many years and many populations. When the mind grows still, through meditation, through deep breathing, through simple presence, the immune system appears to function with a little more precision, a little more strength, a little more grace. The evidence is not perfect. The studies are not all large or long-term. The mechanisms are not fully mapped, but the direction is consistent. And sometimes, in science, as in sleep, the quietest signals are the most reliable, the ones that repeat, gently, across time, across studies, across the vast, patient landscape of the body's own research into itself. Perhaps the body has always known what science is only now confirming, that healing does not require force. It requires space. It requires quiet. It requires the simple, ancient permission to rest. And perhaps tonight, that permission has already been given. Chronic low-grade inflammation is sometimes called silent inflammation. The body's alarm stuck in a quiet hum. Unlike the redness and swelling of an acute injury, silent inflammation operates below the surface. It is a low, persiste signal, not loud enough to notice, but steady enough to wear the body down over time. It is driven by molecules called cytokines and transcription factors that keep the inflammatory response gently simmering, even when there is no wound to heal. Researchers have linked this chronic, low-grade inflammation to a range of conditions, from fatigue and poor sleep to cardiovascular strain and accelerated aging. It is not a disease in itself. It is more like a background noise that the body cannot quite tune out. A fire alarm that rang once and never fully stopped. Meditation, research suggests, may help turn down this hum, not by force, but by offering the body a different signal, one of safety, of stillness, of permission to stop sounding the alarm. And perhaps tonight, the alarm is already growing quieter. NF-kappa B, a protein complex that drives inflammatory gene expression, appears to decrease after mindfulness programs. NF-kappa B is one of the master switches of inflammation. When activated, it enters the cell nucleus and tells genes to produce inflammatory molecules, cytokines, hemokines, adhesion molecules. It is part of the body's defense system, but when chronically active, it contributes to the persistent hum of silent inflammation. A study by Black and colleagues found that older adults who completed a mindfulness program showed reduced NF-kappa B signaling compared to those who received only sleep hygiene education. The difference was measurable at the molecular level, suggesting that the experience of stillness had reached all the way into the cell's command center. It is a molecular finding, with a poetic implication that stillness can gently ask the inflammatory machinery to ease, not with force, but with the quiet authority of a body that has remembered what safety feels like. Perhaps let your shoulders melt a fraction deeper right now, like candle wax softening in gentle warmth. You are carrying less than you think. C-reactive protein, a marker of systemic inflammation, has been observed to decrease in those who meditate. C-reactive protein, or KRP, is produced by the liver in response to inflammation. Elevated levels are associated with a range of chronic conditions and are widely used in clinical settings as a general marker of inflammatory activity. When CRP is high, something in the body is inflamed, even if the source is not immediately obvious. Several studies have found that regular meditation practice is linked to lower CRP levels, suggesting that the body's inflammatory burden may lighten when the mind grows still. The effect is not dramatic, but it is consistent. And in medicine, consistency often matters more than magnitude. It is not a cure, it is not a guarantee, but it is a quiet signal that the body, given space, begins to ease its own defenses, like a fortress slowly lowering its drawbridge after a long, unnecessary siege. The threat was never at the gate. The walls can rest now. Interleukin 6, a cytokine involved in the inflammatory response, tends to ease with regular meditation practice. Interleukin 6 is one of the body's primary inflammatory messengers. In small amounts, it serves a purpose, signaling the immune system to respond to injury or infection. It is part of the body's rapid response team, arriving quickly wherever help is needed. But when chronically elevated, as it often is in people under persistent psychological stress, interleukin 6 contributes to the body's quiet state of alert. It keeps the inflammatory machinery running when there is nothing left to fix. Research has found that meditation is associated with lower levels of this cytokine, suggesting that stillness may help the body recognize when the emergency has passed. It is as though the body, having been told for so long that something is wrong, finally receives a different message that for now, in this moment, everything is gently, quietly enough, and that message, it turns out, can travel all the way to the cells. Inflammation is not always harmful. It is the body's way of mending. When you cut your finger, inflammation rushes to the site, bringing blood, warmth, and healing cells. The area reddens. It swells. It hurts. But this is the body doing exactly what it should. Acute inflammation is a sign of repair in progress. The problem arises when this response does not turn off, when the alarm keeps sounding long after the threat has passed. Chronic inflammation is not a sign of healing. It is a sign of a system that has forgotten how to stand down. And this is where meditation may help, not by eliminating inflammation, but by helping the body distinguish between the fire that warms a home and the fire left burning in an empty room. Meditation does not fight inflammation. It helps ease the unnecessary hum, the chronic, low-grade version that serves no healing purpose. One fire serves, the other simply smolders. And stillness, it seems, can help the body tell the difference. Psychological stress can trigger the same inflammatory pathways as physical injury. The body does not always distinguish between a wound and a worry. When the mind perceives threat, even an imagined one, the same molecular cascades can be set in motion. Cortisol rise. Cytokines are released. NF-kappa B is activated. The inflammatory response turns on, even though there is no physical injury to heal. This is one of the most striking findings in psychoneuroimmunology, that a thought, a memory, a fear, a hypothetical scenario that may never happen, can produce a measurable inflammatory response in the body. The mind's interpretation of the world has biological consequences, but here is the gentle part. If the mind can trigger inflammation, it can also help ease it. The same pathways that respond to worry also respond to calm. And meditation, by quieting the mind, may quietly calm the body's inflammatory response. healing both at the same time. Through the same doorway rest, when the mind settles, inflammatory signals often settle too. This is one of the most elegant findings in the study of meditation and immunity. The relationship is not one-directional. The mind affects the body, and the body affects the mind. When thoughts slow, cortisol eases. When cortisol eases, inflammatory markers decline. When inflammatory markers decline, sleep improves. And when sleep improves, the mind is calmer still. Researchers describe this as a positive feedback loop, each improvement enabling the next, creating a gentle downward spiral of calm. It is the opposite of the stress spiral, where worry feeds inflammation, feeds poor sleep, feeds more worry. Meditation, by intervening at the level of the mind, can shift the direction of the entire loop. It is a gentle spiral, not downward, but inward, like a room that slowly stops echoing after the noise fades. Each moment of quiet makes the next moment a little quieter still. And tonight, the echoes are already growing soft. Meditation's easing of inflammation may be one quiet pathway through which it supports longer-term well-being. Researchers are careful to note that the evidence is still developing, but the pattern is consistent across multiple studies. Meditation is associated with lower inflammatory markers. And since chronic inflammation is linked to a range of conditions, from fatigue to cardiovascular strain to accelerated cellular aging, even a modest reduction may carry quiet, cumulative benefits. The key word is cumulative. No single meditation session eliminates chronic inflammation, but each session may contribute a small reduction, and over weeks, months, and years, those small reductions can add up to something meaningful. It is not a dramatic intervention. It is a gentle one, the kind that works by accumulation rather than force, like adding one drop of clear water to a murky glass, again and again, until the glass begins to clear. You cannot see a single drop make a difference, but together, they change everything. Whenever you're ready, imagine your forehead smoothing right now, like a lake after the last ripple fades. Nothing to furrow, nothing to solve, just smooth, still water. At the end of every chromosome sits a tiny protective cap called a telomere. Telomeres are often compared to the plastic tips on the ends of shoelaces, small structures that prevent the lace from unraveling. In the same way, telomeres protect the ends of chromosomes during cell division. Keeping genetic information intact, they are made of repeated sequences of DNA, the same 6-letter code, repeated thousands of times, forming a protective buffer at each chromosome's tip. Without this buffer, the chromosome's essential coding regions would be damaged each time the cell divides. They are among the smallest structures in the human body, yet they carry a quietly profound responsibility. Without them, the chromosomes would fray, and the cell's ability to divide and renew would be compromised. Tiny guardians, standing watch at the edge of time. And perhaps there is something gently reassuring in knowing that even at the smallest scale, the body has built-in protections, structures that exist for no other reason than to keep things whole. Each time a cell divides, its telomeres shorten slightly, a quiet rhythm inside every living cell. This shortening is natural, a built-in consequence of how DNA replication works. The enzymes that copy DNA cannot fully replicate the very end of a chromosome, so with each division, a small piece of the telomere is lost. Over a lifetime, this gradual shortening is one of the markers of cellular aging. When telomeres become critically short, the cell can no longer divide safely. It either stops dividing, entering a state called senescence, or is marked for removal. This is not a defect. It is a safeguard, preventing damaged cells from replicating indefinitely. But it means that telomere length is, in a sense, a quiet clock, ticking inside every cell, marking the passage of biological time. But it is not a countdown to be feared. It is simply a rhythm, as natural as the seasons, as steady as the tides, and like all rhythms, it can be influenced by the conditions in which it plays out. Stress accelerates it. Stillness, it seems, may gently slow it down. Chronic psychological stress has been linked to shorter telomeres, but the body also has ways of mending them. Studies have found that individuals experiencing prolonged stress, caregivers, for example, or those living with chronic anxiety, tend to have shorter telomeres than their less stressed peers. The relationship is well documented and consistent across populations. It is as though worry, over time, gently wears away the protective caps. But this is not a one-way street. The body possesses an enzyme called telomerase that can add DNA sequences back to the ends of chromosomes, partially rebuilding telomere length. Telomerase does not reverse aging, but it can slow the rate of shortening, and, under the right conditions, it can restore some of what was lost. And here is where the story turns. Soft meditation appears to support this rebuilding process. In stillness, the body finds space to mend what stress has quietly worn. Not perfectly, not completely, but gently, patiently, one cell at a time. Telomeres, the enzyme that can rebuild telomere length, appears to increase after intensive meditation retreats. In a study by Tonya Jacobs and colleagues, participants who completed a 3-month meditation retreat showed significantly higher telomerase activity than a control group. The enzyme that repairs the protective caps on chromosomes was working more actively in those who had spent time in sustained stillness. The retreat involved several hours of daily meditation practice, so the conditions were intensive, but the finding was striking a purely mental practice. Sitting, breathing, attending to the present moment, produced a measurable change in an enzyme that operates at the molecular level of cell biology. It is a finding that bridges the molecular and the contemplative. The quietest practice, sitting, breathing, being, may reach all the way into the cell and gently encourage the machinery of renewal, as though the stillness outside the body echoes as stillness within the cell. Elizabeth Blackburn, who won the Nobel Prize for Telomere Research, co-authored studies on meditation and telomeres. Blackburn shared the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine in 2009 for her discovery of how telomeres and telomerase protect chromosomes. Her work revealed the fundamental mechanism by which cells maintain their genetic integrity across divisions, one of the most quietly important discoveries in modern biology. In collaboration with health psychologist Elissa Epel, Blackburn went on to explore how psychological states, including those shaped by meditation, might influence telomere biology. Together, They published research suggesting that chronic stress shortens telomeres. While positive psychological states may help maintain them, their work represents a quiet convergence of two worlds: the molecular precision of cell biology and the ancient, unhurried practice of contemplative stillness, science and silence, meeting in the smallest structures of the human body, and finding, to their shared surprise, that they had been speaking the same language all along. Positive psychological states cultivated through meditation are associated with longer telomeres. Epple and Blackburn's research found that individuals who reported higher levels of purpose, mindfulness, and positive affect tended to have longer telomeres. It was not just the absence of stress that mattered. It was the presence of something else, something quieter, something closer to peace. This finding suggests a nuanced picture. Telomere length is not only affected by what we endure, but also by what we cultivate. The inner experience of meditation, the calm, the presence, the gentle awareness, may have a physical echo in the body's tiniest structures, not as a guarantee, but as a tendency, a quiet leaning toward preservation, as though the cells themselves can feel when the mind is at ease, as though peace is not just an emotion, but a condition, one that the body recognizes at every level, as an invitation to maintain, to repair, to hold together a little longer. If it feels right, let your palms grow heavy and warm right now, as though holding a cup of something soothing. Let the warmth spread gently through your fingers. The relationship between meditation and telomere maintenance is still being explored. Science is still gently listening. Researchers are careful to note that the findings are preliminary. The studies are small, the mechanisms are complex, and the relationship between a few minutes of daily stillness and the molecular biology of aging is not yet fully understood. But the direction of the evidence is consistent. Across different populations, different meditation styles, and different measurement methods, the pattern points the same way. Stillness is associated with markers of better cellular health. The details will take years to fully resolve, but the signal is there. Quiet, steady, and patient. And it carries a quietly hopeful message that the body's capacity for renewal may be supported not just by medicine, but by the simple, ancient practice of growing still. Science is still listening, and so, perhaps, is the body, waiting, in its own patient way, for the mind to grow quiet enough to hear what the cells have always known. Rumination, the habit of replaying worries, is strongly linked to telomere shortening. Of all the cognitive patterns studied in relation to telomere length, rumination stands out. The repetitive, circular thinking that replays past mistakes or rehearses future catastrophes is associated with both shorter telomeres and lower telomerase activity. It is the mental equivalent of running the engine while parked, consuming resources without going anywhere. Rumination also activates the same stress pathways that drive cortisol release and inflammatory signaling. So the damage is not just psychological, it is physiological. The body pays a measurable price for the mind's inability to let go. Meditation gently interrupts this loop, not by suppressing the thoughts, but by creating a quiet space between the thinker and the thought, the moment of awareness in which the mind can choose not to follow the spiral, and in that choice, the cells may breathe a little easier. as though letting go is itself a kind of medicine. In stillness, the body has a little more space to maintain its smallest protective structures. This is perhaps the gentlest way to understand the meditation telomere connection. It is not that meditation repairs telomeres directly. It is that meditation reduces the cognitive and physiological stress that wears them down, creating an environment in which the body's own repair mechanisms can work a little more freely. The body already possesses everything it needs to maintain its telomeres. Telomerase is present. The repair machinery exists. What often stands in the way is the chronic activation of stress pathways that divert resources away from maintenance and toward defense. Meditation eases that diversion, not by fighting stress, but by offering an alternative state, like clearing a cluttered table so that someone can finally set down their tools and begin their work. The tools were always there. The skill was always there. What was needed was simply a little more space and a little more quiet. Cortisol follows a natural daily rhythm, rising with the morning and softening toward evening. Cortisol is often called the stress hormone, but that is only part of its story. In a healthy body, cortisol follows a predictable daily pattern called the diurnal cortisol curve. It peaks in the early morning, helping you wake up, feel alert, and face the day. It then gradually declines throughout the afternoon and evening, reaching its lowest point around midnight. This rhythm is one of the body's quietest clocks, coordinated by the hypothalamus, synchronized with light and darkness, and deeply intertwined with the sleep-wake cycle. When the rhythm is intact, the body transitions smoothly from alertness to rest. Energy flows in the morning, calm arrives in the evening, and sleep follows naturally. It does not tick or chime. It simply rises and falls, like the sun, like the breath, like the tide, and when it is left undisturbed, it gently guides the body towards sleep, as it has done, quietly, for as long as bodies have known the difference between day and night. Chronic stress can flatten this cortisol rhythm, keeping the body in a low-level state of quiet alert. When stress becomes chronic, the cortisol curve can lose its natural shape. Instead of peaking sharply in the morning and declining through the day, it flattens, remaining moderately elevated throughout the day and into the night. The body stays in a state of low-grade vigilance, never quite relaxing, never fully resting. This flattened rhythm is associated with poor sleep, daytime fatigue, weakened immune function, and increased inflammatory markers. The body is caught between states, too activated to rest deeply, too fatigued to function well. It is a kind of metabolic twilight, where neither day nor night feels quite right. But here is the comfort: this rhythm is not permanently broken. It is simply disrupted, and with the right conditions, quiet, stillness, the gentle invitation to let go, the body can begin to find its way back to its own natural tempo. The curve was always there. It was only waiting for permission to return. Meditation has been linked to lower cortisol levels, particularly in the evening, gently restoring the natural rhythm. Multiple studies have found that regular meditation practice is associated with reduced cortisol, especially in the hours approaching sleep. This is precisely when cortisol should be at its lowest, clearing the way for melatonin to rise and sleep to arrive. The evening reduction is particularly meaningful because elevated evening cortisol is one of the most common markers of sleep difficulty. When cortisol stays high at night, the body remains alert. The mind races. The muscles hold tension, and sleep onset is delayed. By helping to lower evening cortisol, meditation may not only improve sleep quality, but also restore the natural arc of the cortisol curve itself. It is as though meditation helps the body remember its own schedule. Like an old clock that had been running fast, gently recalibrated by patient hands. The rhythm was never lost. It was only waiting to be found again. Perhaps notice your heartbeat right now. Gentle and steady. Like a clock that knows there is no rush. Each beat a quiet reminder that you are here, you are safe, you are held. The HPA axis, hypothalamus, pituitary, adrenal, is the body's central stress response system. These three structures form a cascade. The hypothalamus signals the pituitary, which signals the adrenal glands, which release cortisol. It is the body's alarm chain, efficient, ancien, and essential for survival. When a genuine threat appears, this cascade can mobilize the entire body in seconds. But when activated too often, or for too long, the HPA axis can become sensitized, responding to smaller and smaller triggers with the same intensity. The threshold for alarm drops. Minor frustrations begin to produce major cortisol responses. The system becomes, in a sense, too good at its job, sounding the alarm for every wisp of smoke. Even when there is no fire, meditation softly moderates this system, helping the body distinguish between genuine threats and the harmless echoes of a busy mind. Like a gentle hand on the alarm, saying not this time, not tonight. You can rest. Melatonin, the hormone that invites sleep, has been observed to increase in meditators. Melatonin is produced by the pineal gland, deep in the center of the brain. Its release is triggered by darkness and suppressed by light, a pattern that has synchronized human sleep with the natural cycle of day and night for millennia. But melatonin is also sensitive to the state of the nervous system. When cortisol is high, melatonin production is suppressed. When the body is stressed, the signal to sleep is muted. Studies have found that meditation, particularly when practiced in the evening, is associated with higher melatonin levels, suggesting that by calming the nervous system, meditation helps clear the way for the body's own sleep signal to rise. It is as though meditation extends an invitation that the body was already waiting to receive. The lights dim, the mind quiets, and melatonin rises gently, like the first star appearing at dusk, not forced into the sky, but simply revealed by the fading of the light. Serotonin, a precursor to melatonin, tends to increase with meditation practice. Serotonin is a neurotransmitter involved in mood regulation, well-being, and the sense that things are, for the moment, enough. It is also the chemical precursor from which melatonin is made. The body converts serotonin into melatonin through a two-step enzymatic process that accelerates in darkness. When serotonin levels are healthy, the pathway to melatonin, and therefore to sleep, flows more smoothly. Low serotonin is associated with depression, anxiety, and sleep disturbance. Meditation has been associated with increased serotonin activity. suggesting that the practice supports not just the endpoint of sleep, but the entire biochemical pathway that leads there, like warmth building gently before dusk. Not a fire, not a blaze, just a quiet, steady glow that prepares the body for the softness that comes next. And perhaps that glow is already building now, steadily, without effort, in the quiet chemistry of your own brain. GABA, the brain's main calming neurotransmitter, increases during and after meditation. Gamma-aminobutyric acid, or GABA, is the brain's primary inhibitory neurotransmitter, while most neurotransmitters excite neurons, making them more likely to fire. GABA does the opposite. It calms them down. It reduces neural activity, quiets anxiety, and promotes relaxation. It is the brain's built-in brake pedal. A study at Boston University found that a single session of yoga and meditation increased GABA levels in the brain, a change visible on brain imaging. Low GABA activity is associated with anxiety disorders and insomnia. Higher GABA activity is associated with calm, reduced muscle tension, and easier sleep onset. GABA is, in a sense, the brain's own lullaby chemical, and meditation appears to help the brain produce more of it, not through any external substance, but through the simple, internal act of growing still. A lullaby that comes from within, sung by neurons that have learned the value of quiet. Oxytocin, sometimes called the bonding hormone, may also increase during loving-kindness meditation. Oxytocin is associated with feelings of connection, trust, and warmth. It is released during physical touch, during acts of kindness, and during moments of genuine human connection. It lowers cortisol, reduces blood pressure, and promotes a sense of safety, all conditions that support sleep. Research suggests that certain forms of meditation, particularly those that focus on compassion, gratitude, and loving kindness, may increase oxytocin levels. In these practices, the meditator silently generates feelings of warmth toward themselves and others. There is no external stimulus. No one else needs to be present. The intention alone appears to be enough. It is a quietly beautiful finding that the act of silently wishing well for others, in the privacy of your own mind, can produce a measurable chemical of connection. As though the heart does not need another person present to feel held, sometimes the intention alone is enough. And tonight, perhaps that intention is already quietly at work. A meta-analysis of 18 randomized controlled trials found that mindfulness meditation moderately improves sleep quality. The study, published by Rush and colleagues in 2019, pooled data from over 1,600 participants across 18 separate trials. The effect size was modest but consistent. Those who practiced mindfulness reported better sleep than those who did not. What made this finding particularly encouraging was the follow-up data. When researchers checked on participants weeks or months after the programs ended, the benefits had not faded. They had grown stronger. This suggests that mindfulness is not a temporary fix, but a cumulative practice, one whose benefits deepen with time, like a path that becomes clearer the more often it is walked. It is a quietly encouraging finding. Not a miracle, not a cure, but a gentle, evidence-based suggestion that stillness, practiced over time, may help the body find its way to deeper rest. If you'd like, let your breath drift deeper into your belly right now, soft and slow, like a tide coming in. There is nowhere else you need to be. Older adults who practiced mindfulness reported significantly better sleep than those taught only sleep hygiene. In a study by David Black and colleagues, 49 older adults were randomly assigned to either a mindfulness program or a sleep hygiene education course. The sleep hygiene group learned practical tips, consistent bedtimes, avoiding screens before bed, limiting caffeine. The mindfulness group practiced present moment awareness. Both approaches seemed reasonable, but the results were clear. Those in the mindfulness group showed significantly greater improvements in sleep quality, daytime impairment, and even markers of inflammation. The knowledge-based approach helped, but the practice-based approach helped more. It is a finding that carries a particular gentleness. For those who have spent years struggling with sleep, the answer was not more information about sleep. It was the quiet practice of being present, of letting the mind rest in the moment. Rather than chasing the idea of rest into the future, meditation and sleep share overlapping neural pathways. Both involve a gentle withdrawal from the outside world. During both meditation and sleep, the brain reduces its responsiveness to external stimuli. Sensory processing dims. The thalamus, the brain's relay station, begins to filter more selectively, allowing fewer signals from the outside world to reach conscious awareness. The internal world grows louder as the external world grows softer. This overlap is not just poetic, it is structural. Many of the same brain regions that show decreased activity during meditation also show decreased activity during sleep onset. The prefrontal cortex quiets, the sensory cortices dim, the default mode network softens. The brain, in both states, is turning inward. They are, in a sense, two expressions of the same impulse, the body's desire to turn inward, to rest, to repair, two rivers flowing toward the same sea, one in daylight, one in darkness, but both carrying the same water. The transition from meditation into sleep can be so seamless that the boundary simply dissolves. Many meditators report that they cannot pinpoint the exact moment when meditation ends and sleep begins. One moment, they are aware of their breathing. The next, they are somewhere deeper, a place without words, without effort, without time. This seamlessness is not a failure of meditation. It is, perhaps, its highest compliment. The body, having been given permission to rest, simply takes the next step on its own. The conscious mind does not need to authorize the transition. The nervous system, already calm, already quiet, simply continues its descent from alpha waves to theta, from theta to the slow, deep rhythms of sleep, like a boat that has been untied from the dock and drifts. Gently, wherever the current takes it, you do not need to steer. You do not need to row. The water already knows the way. Sleep architecture may be gently improved by regular meditation. With more time in restorative deep sleep, sleep is not a single state. It is a series of stages, light sleep, deep slow wave sleep, and REM sleep that cycle throughout the night in roughly 90-minute intervals. Deep slow wave sleep is the most physically restorative stage, when the body repairs tissue, strengthens the immune system, consolidates memory, and releases growth hormone. Studies suggest that meditators may spend more time in this deep stage, and that the transitions between stages may be smoother. This is consistent with the broader picture. A brain that has practiced stillness during waking hours may find it easier to reach the deepest levels of sleep. It is as though the brain, having practiced depth during the day, finds it easier to reach depth at night, sinking a little further, resting a little more completely. Like a diver who has learned to hold still in the water and can therefore descend without effort. Meditation before bedtime has been shown to reduce the time it takes to fall asleep. Sleep onset latency, the minutes between lying down and actually falling asleep, is one of the most common measures of sleep difficulty. For many people, this interval stretches far longer than it should, filled with racing thoughts, restless bodies, and the frustrating awareness that sleep is not arriving. Multiple studies have found that meditation practice, particularly in the evening, is associated with shorter sleep onset latency. The mechanism is straightforward. Meditation lowers sympathetic nervous system activity, reduces cortisol, increases melatonin, and calms the default mode network, all conditions that facilitate the transition from wakefulness to sleep. For anyone who has ever lain awake staring at the ceiling, this is a gently hopeful finding. The practice does not force sleep to arrive. It simply clears the path, softening the mind, easing the body, and letting sleep find its own way in. Like water, finding the lowest point in a quiet landscape. The benefits of meditation on sleep accumulate over time, like a seed growing quietly in dark soil. One of the most encouraging findings from the Rush meta-analysis was that follow-up measurements showed stronger effects than immediate post-intervention measures. The sleep improvements did not fade after the program ended. They grew. Participants who had completed mindfulness programs continued to sleep better weeks and months later. This suggests that meditation is not a temporary fix, but a gradual reshaping, a slow, patient process in which the body learns, remembers, and deepens its capacity for rest. Each night of practice is a deposit in a quiet account, and over time, the balance grows, not dramatically, but steadily, reliably, and without any withdrawal. The seed does not bloom overnight, but it is always growing. And perhaps tonight, something planted weeks or months ago is quietly reaching toward the surface, toward the light, toward rest, toward the kind of sleep that the body has been preparing for all along. Whenever it feels comfortable, imagine your feet sinking gently into warm sand on a quiet shore, the warmth rising slowly through your ankles, your calves. You are grounded. You are held. Both meditation and sleep help the brain organize and store memories. Stillness is the brain's librarian. During both states, the brain replays recent experiences, strengthens useful connections, and prunes away what is no longer needed. This process, called memory consolidation, is essential for learning, emotional processing, and long-term storage. Without it, the brain would accumulate raw data without ever organizing it into meaning. Sleep researchers have long known that sleep is critical for consolidation. What is newer is the recognition that meditation may support similar processes during waking hours. By providing the brain with periods of reduced external input, during which it can begin the work of organizing and integrating stillness. In this context, is not empty. It is deeply productive, but in a way that requires no effort, no intention, no awareness. The brain simply uses the quiet to do its most delicate work. Like a librarian who can only sort the shelves after the visitors have gone home, mindfulness reduces daytime fatigue. Better sleep at night ripples gently into the waking hours. Black and colleagues found that participants in the mindfulness group reported not only better sleep, but also reduced daytime impairment. Less fatigue, more energy, better mood during waking hours. The benefits of nighttime rest were not confined to the night, they spilled over into the day. This is what researchers call a ripple effect. A single improvement that triggers a cascade of secondary benefits. Sleep improves. Mornings feel lighter. Days feel easier. And with easier days comes less evening stress, which means better sleep again. The cycle reinforces itself, gently, turning slowly from vicious to virtuous. A gentle cycle, carrying the body from rest to renewal and back again, like a wheel that, once set in motion, begins to turn on its own, not by force, but by the quiet momentum of one good night leading to one good day, and back again. The earliest written records of meditation date back roughly 5,000 years. Wall art from the Indus Valley Civilization, dating to approximately 3000 BCE, depicts figures seated in meditative postures, cross-legged, hands resting on knees, eyes closed. The Vedas, ancient Indian texts composed over centuries, contain some of the first written descriptions of contemplative practices, including breath awareness and mental focus. 5,000 years. That is longer than any written language, longer than any surviving civilization, longer than most of the technologies we now consider essential. And yet the practice itself is remarkably simple. Sit still. Pay attention. Let go. Long before brain scanners, before cortisol assays, before the word neuroscience existed, human beings discovered that sitting quietly had the power to heal. They did not know why. They simply knew that it worked, and that knowing, passed down through millennia, is perhaps the oldest medicine there is, older than any prescription, and gentler than any procedure. Jon Kabat-Zinn introduced mindfulness-based stress reduction in 1979 at the University of Massachusetts Medical Center. Kabat-Zinn developed an 8-week program that stripped meditation of its religious context and presented it as a clinical tool. He called it mindfulness-based stress reduction, or MBSR, and it became the foundation for most modern meditation research. Kabat-Zinn's insight was that the practice did not need a temple or a tradition. It did not require robes, incense, or belief. It only needed a quiet room and a willing mind. By framing meditation as a secular, evidence-based practice, he opened the door for clinical research, and for millions of people who might never have tried meditation if it had remained wrapped in spiritual language. And that simplicity, that radical accessibility, changed everything. A practice that had been the province of monks became available to anyone with a few quiet minutes and the willingness to pay attention, including, perhaps, you. Tonight, MBSR combines mindfulness, body awareness, and gentle yoga, now offered in hospitals worldwide. The program includes guided meditation, body scan exercises, and simple yoga postures, all designed to cultivate present moment awareness without judgment. Participants learn to notice their thoughts without following them, to observe their bodies without fixing them, and to breathe without controlling. Since its creation, MBSR has been adopted by hospitals, clinics, schools, prisons, and corporate wellness programs in over 30 countries. It has been studied in hundreds of clinical trials and adapted into dozens of derivative programs for depression, chronic pain, anxiety, insomnia, and more. It is, perhaps, one of the quietest revolutions in modern healthcare. No drugs, no surgery, no machines, just the ancient, unhurried practice of paying attention to the breath, to the body, to the moment. And somehow, that is enough. It has always been enough. Buddhist, Hindu, Taoist, Christian, and Sufi traditions all developed contemplative practices independently. Across continents and centuries, human beings arrived at the same quiet conclusion that sitting still, paying attention, and letting go of thought could lead to something deeper. The forms differ: mantra, prayer, zazen, centering, dhikr. But the essence is remarkably similar: a deliberate quieting, a turning inward, a surrender of the mind's restless commentary. This convergence is striking because these traditions developed largely in isolation from one another. They had no shared texts, no common teachers, no scientific framework. And yet, they all arrived at the same practice. The human body, regardless of time or place, seems to know that it heals best in quiet. It is a gentle convergence, suggesting that the need for stillness is not cultural, but biological, written not in scripture, but in the nervous system itself. And every tradition, in its own way, built a doorway to that quiet. Perhaps let any remaining tension in your jaw dissolve right now. Like morning mist in gentle sunlight, you have said enough today. The silence is yours. The word meditation comes from the Latin meditare, to turn something over in the mind gently. The etymology is revealing. Meditation, at its root, is not about emptying the mind or achieving a state of bliss. It is not about transcendence or enlightenment. It is simply about contemplation, the gentle, unhurried act of turning something over, the way you might turn a smooth stone in your hand, feeling its weight, noticing its texture, without trying to change it. This original meaning is closer to what modern mindfulness teaches than many people realize. The practice is not about doing something extraordinary. It is about doing something ordinary. Breathing, sitting, noticing, with an unusual quality of attention, gentle attention, patient attention, the kind of attention that does not demand anything in return, And perhaps that is the most accurate description of what meditation does. It does not push. It does not strive. It simply holds something. A breath, a word, a sensation, and turns it over, gently, until the mind grows still. Over 6,000 published studies have now examined some aspect of meditation. A practice once considered mystical, esoteric, or vaguely spiritual is now one of the most studied interventions in behavioral medicine. From brain imaging to immune markers to gene expression to sleep architecture, meditation has been examined under nearly every scientific lens available. The volume of research has grown exponentially in the past 2 decades. In the year 2000, fewer than 100 meditation studies were published. By 2020, the number had surpassed 6,000. The scientific community, it seems, has decided that stillness is worth investigating, carefully, rigorously, and with increasing confidence. And yet, for all the data, the experience itself remains beautifully simple. You sit, you breathe, you let go. The science confirms what the body always suspected, that stillness heals. And perhaps that is enough to know tonight. Richard Davidson at Wisconsin pioneered bringing Tibetan monks into brain scanners in the early 2000s. Neuroscientist Richard Davidson invited experienced Tibetan Buddhist monks, some with over 10,000 hours of meditation practice, to his laboratory at the University of Wisconsin. There, using functional MRI and EEG, he measured their brain activity during meditation. The results were astonishing. The monks showed patterns of neural activity that had never been seen before in any population, including sustained, high-amplitude gamma waves and unprecedented levels of neural synchrony. Their brains were not just calm. They were organized in ways that suggested a fundamentally different relationship between awareness and neural activity. It was a meeting of 2 ancient disciplines, the contemplative and the scientific, each reaching toward the same question from opposite ends. What happens when the mind grows truly still? The monks had always known. The scanners were only beginning to catch up. Yoga Nidra, yogic sleep, is designed to guide the practitioner into the space between waking and sleeping. Yoga Nidra is a guided relaxation practice in which the practitioner lies down and follows verbal instructions through stages of body awareness, breath awareness, and visualization. The goal is not unconsciousness, but a state of conscious deep rest, hovering in the threshold between waking and dreaming. Unlike active meditation, Yoga Nidra requires no effort of concentration. The practitioner simply listens and follows. The body enters a state of profound relaxation, while the mind remains faintly aware, a condition that resembles the hypnagogic state that precedes sleep onset. It is one of the oldest sleep-adjacent practices in human history, and its principle is simple. If you can guide the mind to the edge of sleep while keeping awareness alive, the body enters a state of profound restoration, a rest within rest, a dream before dreaming. Perhaps that edge is closer than you think tonight. In many traditions, the goal of meditation was never productivity. It was simply to be present. In a culture that often measures value by output, this is a quietly radical idea. Meditation does not produce anything. It does not optimize performance or enhance efficiency. It does not generate reports, meet deadlines, or solve problems in the conventional sense. It simply invites the practitioner to be here, now, without agenda, without striving, without the need to become anything other than what they already are. And in that simplicity lies its deepest therapeutic power, not what it adds, but what it removes. Perhaps that is its most healing quality, the removal of pressure, the pressure to do, to achieve, to become. In meditation, you are already enough. And in that enoughness, the body finds the permission it needs to heal. Permission that was always available, but rarely offered with such gentleness. Psychoneuroimmunology studies how the mind, nervous system, and immune system talk to each other. It is a field with a long name and a simple premise. The mind and the body are not separate. They are in constant conversation. A network of chemical signals, nerve impulses, and immune responses that flow between brain, gut, glans, and every cell. This field has demonstrated that psychological states, joy, grief, stress, calm, produce measurable changes in immune function. A worried thought can suppress natural killer cell activity. A moment of genuine connection can increase oxytocin and reduce cortisol. The body is listening to the mind at all times and responding, at the molecular level, to what it hears. Meditation enters this conversation like a quiet guest who changes the tone of the room. The stress signals soften, the immune signals strengthen, and the body, receiving this new information, begins to shift, gently, gradually, toward a state that favors healing. If you'd like, let your shoulders release one final layer of holding right now. You are safe to let go. You have always been safe to let go. A thought can trigger a hormone, which influences an immune cell, which affects healing, all in quiet conversation. This cascade is the essence of psychoneuroimmunology. A worried thought activates the amygdala, which signals the hypothalamus, which triggers cortisol release, which suppresses certain immune functions and increases inflammatory signaling. The chain is fast, automatic, and measurable. Conversely, a calm thought can reverse this chain, easing cortisol, supporting immune activity, and creating conditions for repair. The body does not distinguish between a real threat and a worried thought. It responds to both with the same biochemical machinery. This is why the mind matters so much for physical health. The body is not a machine with separate parts. It is a conversation, and every thought, every breath, every moment of stillness is a word spoken into that conversation. Tonight, the words are gentle, and the body is listening. The heart has its own small network of roughly 40,000 neurons, sometimes called the little brain. This intrinsic cardiac nervous system can sense, feel, learn, and remember independently of the brain in the skull. It processes information locally, adjusting heart rhythm in real time based on signals from the body and the environment. It sends more signals upward to the brain than it receives downward, making it not just a pump, but a quiet participant in the body's emotional and regulatory life. During meditation, the heart's rhythm grows more coherent, more regular, more harmonious. This coherence is associated with reduced anxiety, improved emotional regulation, and a deeper sense of inner calm. The heart, it seems, has its own way of knowing when things are safe, as though the little brain in the chest, given silence, begins to find its own gentle peace, a peace that it then sends upward, softly, to the brain above. A quiet collaboration between two minds that share the same body. The gut-brain axis allows the digestive system to send signals directly to the brain. The gut contains over 500 million neurons, more than the spinal cord, earning it the nickname, the second brain. Through the vagus nerve and a complex network of chemical messengers, the gut communicates constantly with the brain, influencing mood, stress response, immune function, and even sleep patterns. This communication is bidirectional. The brain affects the gut, and the gut affects the brain. Stress tightens the gut. A calm gut calms the brain. Meditation, by calming the vagus nerve and reducing cortisol, may help quiet the gut's distress signals, breaking the cycle of gut-brain stress that can keep both systems in a state of low-grade unease. It is a conversation that flows both ways, and when the mind grows still, the gut often follows, settling into its own gentle rhythm of digestion and rest. Two brains, one body, and tonight, both are being given the same quiet invitation to let go. Epigenetics suggests that meditation may influence which genes are expressed. Stillness, reaching into the DNA. Epigenetics is the study of how behaviors and environment can change the way genes work, not by altering the DNA sequence itself, but by affecting which genes are turned on or off. Chemical modifications to the DNA molecule can activate or silence specific genes without changing the underlying code. Research at Massachusetts General Hospital found that the relaxation response was associated with changes in the expression of genes related to energy metabolism, inflammation, and cellular aging. Regular practitioners showed patterns consistent with reduced oxidative stress and improved mitochondrial function. The cellular energy systems that power every organ in the body. It is a finding that reaches deep. The experience of stillness, it seems, can travel all the way from the mind to the molecule, like light passing through water, invisible in transit, but transformative at the destination. And perhaps, even now, that light is reaching places you cannot see. The body replaces most of its cells over time. In stillness, this renewal happens with a little less interference. The lining of the gut renews itself every few days. Red blood cells are replaced every 4 months. The skeleton rebuilds itself over roughly 10 years. Skin cells cycle every 2 to 3 weeks. The body is always remaking itself, quietly, continuously, without being asked. This renewal requires energy, raw materials, and coordination. When the body is stressed, resources are diverted toward defense, leaving less for maintenance and repair. When the body is calm, those resources are freed up. Meditation, by reducing the chronic activation of stress pathways, may create conditions in which the body's natural renewal processes can operate with a little more ease, like a river that flows more smoothly when there are no stones in its path. The body knows how to renew. It only asks for a little quiet in which to do its work. And tonight, that quiet is here. Perhaps the simplest truth is this: when the mind is at peace, the body is free to do what it does best: heal. This is the thread that runs through every fact, every study, every finding we have wandered through tonight. The mind and the body are not separate. They are one continuous conversation. And when the mind grows quiet, when the worries soften, when the breath slows, when the muscles release, the body receives a signal as old as life itself. It is safe to rest. It is safe to repair. It is safe to heal. This signal does not require understanding. It does not require effort. It does not require you to remember anything about the default mode network, or telomeres, or NF-kappa B. The body already knows. It has always known. It knew before science existed, before language existed, before thought itself took shape. Like a garden after rain, the gardener does not pull the flowers upward. The rain does not explain itself. They simply arrive. They simply give. And the garden, in its own time, in its own quiet way, begins to grow. Perhaps the most softly remarkable thing about stillness is that it asks nothing of you. It does not require effort, or discipline, or perfection. It does not need you to sit a certain way, or breathe a certain rhythm, or believe a certain thing. It simply offers a space, and in that space, the body quietly begins to do everything it was always designed to do. Like a garden after rain, the gardener does not pull the flowers upward. The sun does not shout at the soil. The rain does not explain itself. They simply arrive, they simply give, and the garden, in its own time, in its own quiet way, begins to grow. You never needed to learn anything tonight. You never needed to remember a single fact about the default mode network, or telomeres, or NF-kappa B. If some of these quiet truths stayed with you, that is a gentle gift. If none of them did, that is equally fine. Your body was listening in its own way. In its own time, it heard what it needed to hear, and it is already doing what it knows how to do. If you'd like, let one last wave of softness move through your whole body now, from the crown of your head, down through your forehead, your jaw, your shoulders, through your chest and your belly, down through your hands, your legs, all the way to the tips of your toes, like warm water, like sunlight on still water, like the gentlest rain that ever fell. May your dreams be soft tonight. May your body feel warm and held. And may the quiet healing that happens in sleep, that ancient, patient, gentle healing that has been happening since the very first breath was ever drawn, be more than enough. Good night.